All right, so the question says a net of a three-dimensional figure is shown. What is the surface area of the three-dimensional figure? All right, so what's important in this question? Jeffrey? Okay, so what does the word net actually mean to us? Talked about this yesterday. Kaylee? It's a what?
3D figure like taken apart into pieces.
So 2D rep of 3D shape. All right. What else is important in this question?
Question.
Mm-hmm. All right, and then surface area is important because why? Why is surface area important? Garrett?
That's the kind of area we're finding.
Right, so it tells us exactly what we're finding with the shape. All right, so looking at surface area, what does that mean? I know it's been a while since we've done one of these, so what does finding the surface area of a shape mean?
Finding the area of the surface of the shape.
Right, so essentially if we're finding the area, does that mean I have to find the area of all these figures?
Yes. Yes.
All right, so how many different shapes do you see up here? How many different shapes do you see up there? Austin?
3.
Okay, so possibly 3. So we see triangles and we see rectangles, right? So the formula, and the reason I'm asking is because ultimately we have to use the formulas to find the area of those shapes. So for a triangle, what is the formula for a triangle, Garrett?
Length times height, or base times height.
So it'd be length times width, but there's more, right, divided by 2, or you can do base times height divided by 2. They essentially mean exactly the same thing. So it doesn't matter if you call it length and width or base and height. It's still the same. All right, and then what's the formula for a rectangle? Travis? Length times width. So those are the two formulas we're going to be using. And I'm actually going to start with the triangles just because I feel like that's the easiest shape. It's got the most information. So I know that my height is 4. So I'm going to do 4 times what? Am I doing times 5 or times 6?
6.
Why?
Because that's the bottom of the triangle.
How do you know?
Because on the other side, on the triangle, has 6 feet.
Okay, so you're using the characteristics of the rectangle. We know opposite sides are the same. All right. How many of you guys said that 5 was the base? Nobody? Well, that's good. And the reason, this is the mathematical reason as to why 5 is not your base. Because the base and the height have to be what? Starts with a P. Have to be what, Caleb? They have to be perpendicular. So this 5 is not perpendicular to my height. Remember, perpendicular forms that 90-degree angle. So I know that my base is 6. So I'm going to do 4 times 6 equals what? 24. And then I cannot forget to divide by 2, which gives me 12. So the area for this triangle is 12 feet squared, and the area for this triangle is 12 feet squared. Okay, so essentially I've kind of found the two hardest shapes that I have to deal with on this shape. All right, so the next shape, which one do we want to do? Garrett?
2 rectangles
On the sides? Okay, so we know that the length is going to be 10, but how do I figure out what the width is? Do I just assume that it's 6? Or is there a number that tells me what my width is? So only 2 people know. 3 people possibly. Sebastian, what do you think the width is? Why? You're right, but why? Is that what you put on your paper? So why'd you pick it? Don't give me a shoulder shrug, you're right. What made you pick 5 over 6? I mean, it doesn't even matter if it makes sense. Like, just what made you say, okay, I'm doing 5 and I'm not multiplying by 6?
That's because we use 6 for triangles.
Say it again.
We use 6 for triangles.
Because the 6 is with the triangles. Okay, that's good reasoning. So he's saying, well, the 6 is down here with the triangles. How is the 6 going to be over here with my rectangle? So that's fine. That's good reasoning. Who else picked 5? Okay, Brayden, why did you pick 5?
Because the triangle in the middle is bigger than the one on the sides.
Okay, so again, using our logic, right? The triangle on the bottom is bigger than the triangle on the side. What do we know about the base here and the base, or sorry, the width here and the width here? Kaylee?
When you put them all together, they both have to be the same length.
But they're not the same length, right? Because this one, you can tell just by looking at it, is bigger. Not by much, but it's bigger. Did anybody else have any other reason why they picked the 5? Travis?
Because if you make the shape back in 3D, the 5 would be where the small rectangle is.
Right. So if you're looking at the shape and you can visually fold this side up and this side over, those two sides meet, which means they have to be exactly the same length. That's the mathematical brain thinking. Not everybody can fold that up in your mind and see that, but the logic you used, perfect. Who else did I call in? Brayden, the logic you used, perfect. Kaylee, your reasoning, perfect. You don't always have to think like, you don't always have to think like a mathematician in order to get these questions right. Sometimes it's just what? Logic, common sense. I mean, common sense is going to tell us that the 6 is bigger than that outside length. So for this one, we're going to do 10 times 5. So this is 5. 10 times 5, which gives us 50. And we know that this is 50 feet squared. So if the outside one on the right is 50 feet squared, what do we know about the outside on the left? Jeffrey? It's 50 feet squared also. And then the last one we need to do is 10 times 6, which gives us 60, and that's 60 feet squared. So are we done? Nope, we are not. We have found all the areas, but then what do we have to do with all these areas?
I don't know.
Yep. And I just added my 250s and my 212s, just because I don't feel like doing an extra 2 numbers. And you end up with 184 feet squared. So how did we do with that one? Okay. All right, so definitely make sure on the back that you're doing your TMB and your last name. And today I'm gonna have you guys turn it into the bin. Okay, so go turn it in and then get your notebooks out. And we are gonna get started with today.
Can I go to the bathroom?
You need to hear the instructions first. At the moment, no. Once the instructions are given and you guys get started, yes.
Can I buy 2 glue sticks from
No, not right now, y'all. Just sit down. You're using your time because you have an activity that's worth a test grade today. So if we want to keep asking questions and going to the bathroom and doing this and doing that in the middle of instruction, you're not going to get done. So just come back, sit down. We'll get everything once the instructions have been given and you've started this activity. All right. We are going to be looking at the notes that we took yesterday. So the inside of your notes, so this was our notes on the front side, we essentially are going to be completing this bottom section. So I'm going to give you a scenario and you're going to essentially determine the independent, the dependent variables. You're going to determine the relationship. You're going to make a table. You're going to write the equation, and you're going to complete a graph. Okay? The way that I want you to do it in your notebook, and at this point I don't need anybody writing, I need all pencils down, and I need you listening and looking. In your notebook, each one of you are going to complete this in your notebook so that everybody does have an example. Then, once you have come to me and shown me, and I've given you a check plus and I give you a graph paper, you're then just transferring your information onto your graph paper. So for today, you're given a problem or a scenario. So my scenario was I can travel 35 miles per gallon of gas. I had to go in and I had to identify the independent and the dependent variables. So the independent was the gallons of gas, determines the miles I'm going to be able to travel. I have my table labeled X, Y, and also what the X is representing and the Y is representing. And then I have my numbers in here. I have my equation, which is y equals 35x, or 35 times whatever my gallons are. I have my graph labeled. Where did I get these points from? Where did the points come from, Lauren? Came from the table. And then the last thing is the relationship. So the amount of gallons used determines the amount of miles traveled. You must use the word determine when you write your relationship. Yesterday on your cool downs, for the most part, we all did really well on number 1 on the left side. Everyone at the table, we figured it out for the most part. Identifying the independent and the dependent variable, we were about 70%. A lot of you guys identified it, but you added way more information that you needed. Like here, gallons used, miles traveled. Like, keep it simple. When you got over to the relationship part, there were very few of y'all, were in like the 20%, that could tell me what the relationship was. And I'm just like, if you told me that the number of people determines the amount of profit, essentially, then why couldn't you have just wrote that? So if you identified the independent as the number of people and the dependent as the cost per ticket or whatever it was, or profit, I don't even remember now. Like, all you have to do, guys, is take that information and put it into a sentence. That's it. So if you get that part right, you get everything else right. People will write in numbers. People will write in the coordinates. I'm like, what on earth is going on? So it was little hurt my head a little bit. So again, as a group, everybody is doing this. You must have all of the highlighted parts here. So whatever's highlighted, and once I get done recording this, I will take this off video and project it up there so you know exactly what you need. But you have to have a problem, table, independent, dependent, graph, equation, and the relationship. Once you have completed that as a group, everybody agrees, you're going to bring your notebook to me. I'm going to give you a check plus. Then I'm going to give you a piece of giant graph paper. This is where you're going to transfer the information in your notebook, which is technically your rough draft. So if you make any mistakes, you make them in there. You're going to transfer all your information to this graph paper. Tomorrow, we are going to be doing an error analysis. So once we're done with today and the graphs or the chart papers, and I'll show you what it's supposed to look like once you get it on your chart paper. But once all of our chart papers are done, they're going to be up around the room. Tomorrow, you're going to independently be walking around and looking at what people put on their charts. You're checking their graphs, you're checking their equations, you're checking if they identified the independent, dependent variables correctly. If you agree, on your sticky note, you're going to write, I agree, and tell me why you agree. If you disagree, I disagree, and tell me why you disagree. All right, so that is tomorrow. So today you have to use your time really wisely. I had 2 groups not finish in first period, and they even worked through the math break. So that means you guys have to work a little bit faster because you don't have that extra math break time. On your charts, make sure that it is not written in the teeny tiny corner of your chart paper. You have a giant piece of chart paper for a reason. It needs to be big, it needs to be legible, and it needs to be neat. The requirements are that you have everything that you put here on there. Yes, glue your problem on there. If you want to cut your problem and make it smaller so you have more room, fine. If you want to put it in the middle of your page, fine. If you want to put it in the bottom corner, fine. I don't care. It's your anchor chart. Whatever your group comes up with. But please make sure that you have all the requirements, because this is what is getting graded for your test grade, not what's in your notebook. So if you forget to put something from your notebook to your paper, it's 10 points off for everything that's not on there, or whatever is wrong. When you bring me your notebook, I'm not checking to see if it's correct. I'm checking to make sure that you have all of your stuff there. Does that make sense? All right. You are working with the people that you are sitting with, so obviously I gotta move you. So don't worry about that, I'll move you in. And I'm actually going to break up Caleb and Lucas. I'm gonna spread you guys out. So are there questions with this or with this?
No, ma'am.
All right, each one of you, when we get started and everything has been answered, you're gonna get a bright colored piece of paper. This is your problem or your scenario or whatever you wanna call it. Okay, questions?
No.
None?
Nope.
Okay.